Good morning, everyone who has joined us on this Zoom call. And I wanted to say we are delighted to have Supervisor Letourneau join us today. Supervisor Letourneau represents the Dulles District for the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors, and he's been reelected 3 times to that position. In that position, he has led a major effort at Loudoun County Economic Development to bring in more commercial development. And he has also focused on transportation issues, especially Route 606, Loudoun County Parkway, and the Silver Line, the Metro Rail Silver Line out to Loudoun County. Today, he'll be speaking to us about the Noise Overlay District, CPAM, and relationship to what's going on in Loudoun County. And because his time is short, I want to turn it over to him. And thank you very much. And I think you have some slides, I understand.
I do, yes. Tom, my staff is going to drive that for us. I don't know what, let's see. Okay.
Coming up.
There we go. And I have some backup as well. I have Elena Ray, who is our outstanding Director of Planning and Zoning, and she's going to be kind of on the staff level for Loudoun County, obviously overseeing what will become a CPAM, and we'll get into that in a minute. So any questions that I can't answer, hopefully Elena can. But let me just start by saying good morning to everybody. It's great to be with you all. I have always said that I am very proud to be the Dulles District Supervisor specifically, and have Dulles Airport in my magisterial district in the Board of Supervisors. It is primarily in Loudoun County, as you know, especially the terminal and even their control tower. So I've been always proud to represent the airport and the airport community, and certainly understand the type of development and economic growth that it has really brought to Loudoun County over all these years. And so part of this is really about the partnership that exists between the county and the airport to be able to coexist in a thriving community like ours with a growing population and growing economic base. And make sure that we're respecting each other and making sure that we can create an environment where our residents live and have a very high quality, but also the airport can operate in the way that it was intended to when they chose to put the airport way out here at the time, totally undeveloped land, 30 miles west of Washington. So just getting into the slides a little bit, going to the next one, which is the background. We have noise contours. You're all, I think, familiar with this from the process of something that the Federal Aviation Administration does to basically give us what the footprint is of what noise is like around an airport. But for the county, it's a zoning tool that we use to help us dictate the type of development that's compatible with the airport. With the idea being that the areas that are the most sensitive are really not places that you would want residential growth to be. Not places where you'd want a lot of people living. And that's consistent with what the Federal Aviation Administration has said for a long time. There aren't necessarily hard and fast laws about this, but there's a lot of best practices and there's a lot of experience around the country. You know, I grew up in Massachusetts, and one of my first real jobs was working at Logan Airport for the Massachusetts Port Authority in Boston. And I worked in the media relations office 3 summers, fantastic summer job. This was pre 9/11, so I kind of had my ability to roam around and go out with the shift managers and do runway checks and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of what we did was actually managing the East Boston community around Logan Airport. And there you have residential development in an urban city center right up against the airport. And when I was there, there was an effort underway to build a new runway at Logan, which eventually did get built, primarily for the use of regional service commuter jets. We did a lot
and it will be
Cessnas and so on going on there. And the community input and opposition and so on was significant because you just didn't have those buffers. And so to this day, there are a lot of noise restrictions in place, and pilots have to take certain precautions when they take off and turn a certain way and reduce throttle and those kinds of things. And we don't have that at Dulles. We do at Reagan National, but I think the intent of having Dulles where it is to be able to operate in a more unconstrained environment. So from the county standpoint, our noise contours are really designed to help us with that. Go to the next slide. So there was a new noise study done in 2019 that proposes new contours based on the ultimate build out of the airport and operational changes associated with the FAA's Next Gen implementation program. And I think folks on this call are probably much more familiar with that than the general public is, but Next Gen is basically designed to use space more efficiently up in the air and be able to just operate overall in a different way with a little bit more flexibility and so on. One of the features of that is what is referred to as a triple simultaneous approach, where all three, in airports that have three runways that are parallel, all of them are able to be utilized at the same time. And Dulles has been one of those airports that the FAA has looked at for that triple simultaneous operations. The Loudoun County Board of Supervisors, coincidentally, in 2019, also passed an update to our comprehensive plan. It was the first major update in 20 years. And Elena and her team certainly have the battle scars of a process that pretty much took the entire board term to complete to get us to that point. But we did include specific language in that 2019 comprehensive plan that directed the county to consider the new contours being put forth by the FAA and the Airports Authority with legislative land applications, and to update the Airport Impact Overlay District map. So if we go to the next slide. Here we're going to start looking at what the changes are between what was the existing map, which was done in '93, and what we're looking at with the new map. So and there's a great document that the county has, which we can make available to you. It's an online tool that you can use that our GIS department did that allows you to see all this and be able to get into a very granular level and look at what development actually exists on the ground today in these areas. But as you can see here, the red and the blue solids are the current airport noise contours that the county adopted back in '93. And then the sort of checkered pattern is what the forecasted airport noise contours are looking at the new study. And we're showing you the 60 in blue and the 65 in red, with of course the 65 being more the more restrictive due to the higher noise as part of that formula. And so you can see that expands quite a bit to the north, and that's driven by the activity in those north-south runways and what conditions really are on the ground today. And then you can see it actually contracts somewhat in the west. The overall effect of this is 437 acres added to the 65 LDN and 476 removed from the 65 LDN. So it's actually very close, and it's almost a wash in terms of the total amount of land that is involved in the change between these two things. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to drill down a little bit into those areas. And you can see this color-coded map is showing you some of the place types that exist in Loudoun County. And you can see in the areas added to the LDN 65 what those designations are, the largest of which is suburban mixed use, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit. The areas where we are showing sort of this checkerboard with lines across, the straight lines across are residential areas, planned residential areas, so areas that today have the ability to build residential on them that are being removed from the 65. So this will be area now that'll be open for this type of development. Now I should tell you, kind of in that biggest section on the west side where you see all those lines, That's an area along what is now Arcola Mills Drive and leading to Evergreen Mills Drive that has a lot of data center development in it. Some of the land in question here, the board actually just recently approved a data center application for. So although this area is being removed from the 65, it won't develop as residential, even though if we adopt these new contours, it could. You'll see another area being removed a little bit down on the southern side as well. And then conversely, the checkerboard areas, I'm going to get into a little bit more detail on those. Relatively small amount to the north, just one very small section, then a little bit more to the west. And you can see those place types there. If we go on to the next slide. So this is showing the impacts to residential development, existing residential now proposed that's within the LDN 65. So as we get very close in here, this is the southern part of Loudoun County. This is in my district, the Dulles district, and this is a community that's known as the Eastgate community. And you can see with where those lines are now going, there is some addition to basically a group of townhouses, a block of townhomes that are now getting put in the LDN 65. There have been some concerns expressed by some of the existing residents about what the impact would be for them if their home, which has already been built, is moved into the LDN 65 category. Practically speaking, this area is developed where there's homes, so it doesn't really affect much. I mean, they're already there. We're not going to remove them, obviously. They're there, but they're now in a 65 status, driven by sort of existing airport operations. So that's something we're going to have to work through. There's one other area where we sort of have this situation in the west, in sort of the Brambleton area, where we have just east of Brambleton, where we have development that's right now actually underway, residential development that would be put into the 65. And it's just obviously just too late to do anything about that. I'm going to talk later in a minute about sort of what some of the approaches the board may take to that, but that is a little bit of a concern. And then of course, conversely, you have some areas that are undeveloped that are no longer in the 65. And so those now would not have a residential restriction on them. And you can see that kind of where that area is there from the cursor. Moving on to the next slide. So the area that's probably been the most discussion about for me has been this new group here, where the old line, as you can see, the solid red line was staying to the north, and the dotted line is now dipping south into Loudoun County Parkway and then curving up. So these empty parcels on both sides of the road there are all designated as suburban mixed use. And there have been active applications on these parcels for that type of development. I've had quite a bit of discussion with the Airports Authority, from Jack Potter down to his team, about these areas. So when you really break down why this section of the county is moving into the 65 plus, it's really entirely driven by what would be the addition of the fifth runway, which would be to the south of those parallel east-west runway that's already there. So it would sit south of that. The future on that is obviously subject to a lot of external factors. From what we understand about the growth of the airport, even with some of the things that we were hoping United Airlines was going to do right before the pandemic hit, and even things that they had started talking about publicly, including Scott Kirby, they were going to be essentially utilizing downtime in the existing airport and adding several banks of flights during times where the airport wasn't busy. And there's a lot of capacity in the airport today for that without needing that fifth runway. So what we're likely going to do here, and what sort of the process will be for us, is to talk about whether this needs to become a complete restriction on residential in this area specifically, or whether there's some sort of interim type of designation that the county could use here, that essentially requires perhaps even a more enhanced level of noise buffering, and certainly an enhanced level of notification, but not actually restricting this development. Because we're in a tight spot here. We have property owners that have invested heavily in these areas. We have, in one case with a development that Peterson Company has here, they've already spent close to $16 million developing this property as a mixed-use property. And then here we come down the road with a new map that changes things for them pretty significantly. So that's going to be just a conflict that the county has to sort of work out. So going to the next slide, impacts to individual properties. So there's zoning regulations at the 1 mile buffer, which is I believe what I live in. There's a disclosure statement that requires you to let folks know. One of the things that I've tried to have discussions about over the years is making sure that our real estate community is aware of this. I've had some discussions with the Dulles Area Association of Realtors about that, because I'm not positive that that paperwork always gets transmitted during closing like it's supposed to be. It is technically in our rules, in our ordinance, that it needs to be. At the 60 LDN, there becomes performance standards, acoustical treatments, navigation easements, disclosure, those kinds of things. And then at the 65, as I've said, is a prohibition on all new and residential lots. And as I mentioned, there has been some board discussion, frankly, not so much from me, but a few of my colleagues, about the perceived impacts and property values for those that are added into the airport impact overlay district. I think for those that are in the 1 mile and the 60, we have thousands of units in the county that are already in that status. The real estate market around here is extremely hot, high demand. It really hasn't had an impact that I can see. And so I've had a couple residents that we've had that discussion with. Those in the 65 are more worried about it. Again, I think there may be a way for the county to handle that. The impression that I get from the airports authority is that, frankly, when we're talking solely about existing homes that are already there, that's not really what their priority is in terms of ensuring that we've, updated the overlay district to impacts, show those changes. Next slide. So the evaluation of the impacts that are going on by staff would be, fiscal impacts. What are the change in public services demand that come with having new areas that are restricted versus areas that now allow residential development? Same thing for transportation, housing units, place type designations, whether we need to look at that revised comprehensive plan and make any changes to it based on updating the airport overlay district. And then anything else that may come up during the agency review, all the different county departments that are going to look at this, and what sort of impacts and issues that it might have. So what the board has done, going to the next slide, on February 2nd, we initiated a new comprehensive plan amendment. And the scope of that, the board direction, is to take a strategic approach to push through zoning updates, evaluate all those impacts that we just went through, amend the airport impact overlay district map and the policy statements in the 2019 general plan, go through an agency comment period. We will have public input in this process, citizen engagement, public hearings, and then ultimately adoption. And the schedule as it currently stands is for this process to take a little over a year and to come back to the Board of Supervisors in May of 2022. Now, Fairfax County, to my understanding, has not updated their map. I know there's been some controversy over some of the decisions that have been made there from a land use standpoint. And I would point out that the difference really is, in their case, we're talking about existing, runway usage that is currently having an impact as it stands today and will into the future, versus some of the Loudon stuff being driven by potential future runway and so on. But nevertheless, I think, we certainly agree, I agree, and the Airports Authority agrees that there's value in adopting the new overlay district in Loudoun County and being accurate, especially, to our north, when the 93 contours were adopted, the location of that runway actually shifted. So the alignment for all these years has been a little bit off for what it should be. So that's something that we can fix in this process, among other things. And then, just be more clear for our residents to understand moving into this community what those impacts are. We do get noise complaints at the board level. I get them every few weeks or so from someone. They went down quite a bit over the last 9 months or so. But air traffic, at least judging from my backyard, is starting to pick back up. And so, we will continue to get those, and it's very helpful to be able to explain to people that, hey, this is something the county looks at. This is something that we plan around. We do have this airport impact overlay districts. For those that live in it, you do live in it. There should have been disclosure for you when you moved in. And for new residents, this is something that you're notified about, so where you are and what's going to happen. It's hard to believe, but sometimes people just don't necessarily fully appreciate that they are very close to a major international airport when they live here and when they move here. So it's something that makes a lot of sense for us. So that's kind of the process. That's the discussion that we're having. I think the points of discussion moving forward are really going to be centered around those sort of 3 areas that I highlighted, the 2 areas where we have existing residential development, they get moved into the 65, and then the 1 area that is pushed into the 65 where there's not development on the ground, but there's planning underway, and we are confident that it's being driven solely just by the 5th runway. So that's why don't I go ahead and pause there, and I'm happy to have any discussion and open it up for questions. And as I said, Elena can help too with some of the specifics.
All right. I think Anita wanted me to go ahead and kind of handle the questions we have, a size of a crowd that I think where if somebody has a question, they can chime in. But let me say first, on behalf of the Committee for Dulles, we certainly applaud the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors for taking on this effort. And we stand here to help out in any way that we can. With respect to the concerns of those citizens who would be impacted by going from the 60 into the 65, I know you and I have had this chat discussion before, and I have thought about this, and I don't know if there is any real impact to them because it's an overlay. It's not a zoning ordinance category, so it wouldn't be a non-conforming use if they came in to expand their unit. Certainly, it shouldn't impact the value point of their homes. What I would be interested in, and I hope the county certainly works with MWA to ask the question of the FAA, if they do jump into this, if they are put into the 65, are they eligible for mitigation funds should there be any problems to their homes because of noise issues? So that would be interesting. And because I think for new homes, they would not necessarily be eligible for any mitigation help for new residents that would be built, or new residential units being built in the 65. So it'll be interesting to get all this information. And so folks, are there any questions of Supervisor Letourneau?
And just Chairman York, just to put a finer point on that, those are the questions that the board pretty much asked when we were having this discussion. And I think, Elena, I don't know if you want to address kind of the process to sort of get some of those answers, but I know that there has since been engagement with the Airports Authority to sort of work through those issues.
Correct, there has. And first, I want to say that that was an excellent presentation from Supervisor Letourneau.
Yeah.
I could not have done that better. So I think he definitely hit on the issues, the primary issues that we're going to have a lot of discussion around as we move this through the process. I do think that it is important for us to get those questions answered, such as would existing residents be eligible for those federal mitigation funds? And I think that as far as the MWA, we will be talking very closely with them. We've already been in contact with Mark quite frequently, and we'll be continuing that discussion. In addition, we've reached out. We met with Fairfax County planning staff yesterday regarding their plans for their overlay. Essentially, it was more, I think it ended up more as a fact-finding mission for them, questioning us to see what we are doing. We honestly, Loudoun really does set the standard for Dulles Airport between the two counties, and they are looking to us to see how we're going to handle this. So I think we've got a good process. I think we have a lot of really good input and questions from the board at this point, and we'll be bringing back an exercise within the next couple of months, a mapping exercise that goes into a lot more detail of what Supervisor Letourneau showed you today on those individual sections that are being impacted. So I think that will be a very good discussion at the board. We'll reach out to MWA prior to that to talk about those individual areas to see if they have any concerns about potential solutions for those specific areas before we come to the board, so that we have those answers.
Excellent. Thank you, Elena. Keith, you wanted to chime in with a question?
Yeah, well, I did more of a comment and an appreciation. Scott, your remarks before were spot on, and Alana, the work we did on the comprehensive plan, I was glad to see, how sensitive it was to the airport, and the county. It really is a tale of two counties that we've got, surrounding Dulles, and in Loudoun, there really is an appreciation for the economic boom that Loudoun has had and this region has had, and the contribution that the airport has provided that, and I really think the reasoned approach that you're taking is one that is just absolutely welcomed. Embrace whatever we can do to support it, from the task force side too. It's great to see that recognition that, the community and the airport can exist. The airport's a dynamic entity. It does change and move. Matt, your experience up in Boston, that's a primer for all of us in airports, what they had to do in Roxbury and the rest, how that, you're talking houses that were built back in the Revolution, and lead glass windows and the work there, and we're trying to avoid that. And transparency is going to be key, is how you get the public to recognize, because we've done such a good job, the planners originally at Dulles, to surround it with a noise buffer, the land, the trees, and everything else, and people don't realize that when you leave South Riding and it takes you 20 minutes to get to the airport, that if you went by Crow, it's across that fence, and they just don't and that's the big challenge I always had at Dulles, and still have in talking with people. So I really do applaud what you're doing, and whatever, I know the Committee for Dulles, the task force, other organizations. I see Kim Hughes is on here. She's done a tremendous amount of work, on noise. There are a lot of people that can help, and we're ready to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Dave Kirby asked, will you be reviewing any new residential home construction requirements, such as soundproofing, windows, and et cetera?
My feeling is that we would be looking at everything, and I'll let Elena chime in as well. But I think, it's a good time to just take a look at how all of that works. I do have certainly some experience with noise attenuation as part of land use applications, because we have had that come in with properties that have been in the 60 plus, and the what the development community has to do to get to that point. But as far as I'm concerned, I think it makes sense to take a fresh look at all of that and just make sure that we're following the most recent science and doing the technically the things that we should do, and make sure that the requirements are where they should be. Elena, do you have anything on that?
I think Supervisor Letourneau is absolutely right. I think that is those types of requirements would live in the zoning ordinance. And when we get to the zoning ordinance portion of this, it would absolutely be important for us to look at the types of measures that have worked and haven't worked. And that's one of the benefits we have since the airport has been here so long, is we do have that experience now of what has worked in new construction and maybe what could use some improvement. So I think we will be looking at that. I think the requirements surrounding noise attenuation studies is something that we need to look at, and how those are reviewed by the county to ensure that we really are getting the mitigation materials in that new construction that is called for by those studies. So we will certainly be looking at that.
Excellent. Any other questions?
So maybe one thing I can just add, Scott, is just kind of as an overall, we do have quite a few new members of the Board of Supervisors. I'm the only one left from the 2011 class. And we had, I think, 5 new members this term. So I do think that continued dialogue on these airport issues is important because these are new issues for some of my colleagues, and understanding kind of what goes into all that. Keith, to your point about what we're trying to avoid. I'm not sure. I'll say, first of all, I think there's not so much that there's resistance, but I also don't think there's necessarily, a lot of knowledge about how all these things kind of work. So I think, as we go to this process, anything that you folks would want to do to maybe reach out to some of those supervisors and kind of talk through, the airport issues and what happens when you do have noise problems and complaints, and historically what, how the FAA and others have responded to that, and the type of restrictions that end up taking place. I think that would be welcome, and I'm sure that they would be interested as well, hearing that perspective. Everybody kind of understands noise from the standpoint of, when you live in this community, there's airplanes above, but I don't know that everybody understands from the airport side of it and the airline side of it and so on what that means, and what the benefit is of having sound policies in place that allow for growth in this airport. We all know that Dulles, I know people on the call know that Dulles is so well positioned in the East Coast, is really the airport that has the most opportunity for expansion. And now that we have leadership at our major carrier, United, that's I think sees the value in Dulles, which we didn't necessarily have for a while. Those opportunities will be there. So what does that mean for Loudoun County? And I think for us, as we try to, as the Silver Line's coming, which it is, I promise, it's still going to be a while. That's a whole other discussion, but it is coming.
Our time in Loudoun.
where we are really engaged in ways that everybody may not even understand about development around those metro stations. And even with the pandemic, the opportunities are there. The interest is there. If you look just broadly at what the sectors are that are still investing in office and buildings, the technology sector is at the front of that list and is still interested in those kind of investments. So believe me when I tell you, we are having exciting conversations about things happening around those metro stations. And so being able to grow the airport and have more international service, for instance, and nonstop service around the country is a major attraction for us to be able to sell to these companies for why they want to be in a place where they can have access to metro and access to the airport and access to the workforce that we have, as well as all the other things that we have. So all of that education is helpful. And I think that's something that, this group could play a role in moving forward, not necessarily even directed specifically toward a certain outcome on something like this, although I'm sure that input will be provided when we get to that stage, but just in general.
I appreciate that, Matt, and Keith. That is something maybe you and I need to put our heads together, working with Dictatos, and maybe come up with some kind of program that we can do for the benefit of supervisors as well as the public. So
Exactly.
we'll talk about that. Jamie, you wanted to chime in?
Yeah, I just had a quick comment, and Supervisor Letourneau, I really appreciate all the information you shared today with everything. I just wanted to, on the business aviation side of the world, just represent if we can help you. I'm with the Greater Washington Business Aviation Association on the volunteer side as the president. So if I can assist you or the supervisors, if we as an association can assist you, I just want to let you know that we're here to help with that from the business aviation community. I also saw that Leesburg was also in some of those noise contours as well. And I know that's not what we're discussing today in any way, shape, or form, but should you need it, I just wanted to offer that out to you all and to anyone here on the Zoom call, should it be needed.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, Leesburg does have its own overlay district, much smaller one.
Right.
Around Leesburg Airport. That a lot of that's in town limits, but not, we end up dealing with it a little bit in that joint land management area as well. So yes, we appreciate that. And that's actually a good point as we do pitch Dulles Airport in our region to some of our prospective future tenants, having that ability on the business side for the amount of traffic that Dulles is able to take and the excellent facilities that are there is a huge benefit. So
Very good.
All right. Anita, before I turn it back over to you to close, I just want to shamefully share this with everybody. The Committee for Dulles is having a lunchtime Zoom event with United on Thursday, March 25th. And if you're interested, we'd love to have you all. We have 3 speakers in particular: Lauren Riley, who will be speaking to United's sustainability program that they have been working on; Eddie Gordon, who is the new managing director for United's hub here at Dulles; and then Evan Koppel, who is the director of sales for the Atlantic region. And combined, they will be talking about the importance of Dulles as their hub, and also that it's safe to actually fly during COVID, and the steps that United and the airlines industry has taken to ensure safety for its passengers. So I hope you'll be able to join us. And if you would like to participate, just go to www.committeefordulles.org and hit the events tab, and it will take you to this, or you can email me and I will send you the link. It is a $30 registration fee to join us. With that, Matt, I want to thank you and Elena for joining us this morning. We certainly appreciate it. It was an excellent presentation, very clear and understandable of what is going on and what needs to be looked at. And again, I want to reiterate on behalf of the Committee for Dulles, we applaud the Board of Supervisors for taking on this action. Wearing my old hat, I was very dumbfounded that the Board of Supervisors for Fairfax found it okay to build new residential units 900 feet under the aircraft flying over. It just did not make any sense. And but hopefully going forward, they will revise their comp plan as well. But thank you, and we stand ready to help out in any way we can. Anita, I'll turn it over to you to close.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Matt. Just want to echo what Scott said. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was right on and very clear and easy to understand. So we will definitely spread the word that people should be following what's going to happen in Loudoun County. I wanted to make a pitch for this committee has a meeting next month Our speaker will be Gregory Potts from WMATA. He's Government Relations Manager, and he'll be talking about, we're going to ask him about the Silver Line funding and getting expectations on when it might be open and stay open all the way out to Loudon and Ashburn. So we hope you all will join us then. That date is April the 8th. Now that appears as the second Thursday, and it's at 9 a.m. So April 8th, 9 a.m. We hope to see you all here again. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Oh, Matt or Tom, if it's allowable, could you send us your slide presentation?
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that, Scott, and we'll also have a link. I think some of you will just enjoy the great work that the staff did for this in the GIS department to create this mapping tool that allows you to see both the current and the future and really zoom in and look at exactly what's there. So we'll send that along as well. And Anita, interestingly, so while you're having Greg on April 8th, there's a pretty good chance that the WMATA board will be adopting the FY22 budget at exactly that time on that Thursday morning. That is right now when we're scheduled for budget adoption. We meet on that Thursday. So we will probably have some answers on some of those questions.
When do you meet? Do you meet before 9 or after?
No, we literally meet at 9.
9. Okay. Okay, so we're up to date on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thanks, Matt.